In today's business landscape, customers demand the highest standard, and companies that fail to meet those standards risk falling behind and losing business. Welcome to Nexus Consultancy. We have dedicated over 15 years in helping businesses to implement ISO management systems for improved quality, compliance, operational excellence, and customer satisfaction. Our company's purpose is simple, which is to empower business and people. Our team of experts work closely with our customers to access their needs and create customized solutions that meet their specific requirements. We conduct thorough audits and evaluations to identify areas for improvement and help our customers implement changes that drive success. Our consultants have extensive experience and serve over 2,000 customers, and we stay up to date with the latest industry trends and best practices. Whether you're a small business just starting out or a large corporation looking to improve your operations, Nexus Consultancy is here to help you optimize your operations, increase profits, and achieve your business goals.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining today's session on Building Trust with ISO 37001, ensuring anti-bribery compliance for ESG success. My name is Su Yin, and I will be guiding you through this important topic. Before we dive into ISO 37001, let's take a step back and talk about something that has becoming a major focus in the corporate world, which is ESG. We are at a time where almost every business is talking about ESG responsibility. In less than 5 years, we are seeing terms such as ESG reporting, ESG investing, ESG framework. And now it becoming part of a mainstream thing that businesses or businessmen we are talking about. So ESG stands for environmental social governance, and it is no longer just a corporate buzzword. Investor, regulator, and even your customer are paying close attention to how businesses operate responsibly. While the E in ESG focuses on environmental sustainability, and the S covers social responsibility, and today we are zooming in on the G, governance. Good governance is the backbone of trust, integrity, and ethical decision-making in any company. And one of the biggest threats to governance is bribery and corruption. In the compliance world, we often refer anti-bribery and corruption simply as A, B, C. Not the alphabet we learned in the school, but something just as fundamental for ethical business practices. And this is where ISO 37001 comes in. It can provide a structured framework for companies to prevent, detect, and respond to bribery risks. And it helps companies build strong government system, ensuring compliance with anti-bribery law and reinforce stakeholder trust, which is an essential part of the ESG agenda. So in today's session, we will explore how ISO 37001 can strengthen your organization integrity, mitigate bribery risks, and also contribute to ESG success. So let's take a look at what we'll be covering in today's session. So there are 4 modules. So we start with an introduction where we will start with some fundamentals and what are the bribery risk factor and how it impact the business. And module 2, we will go through about ethical leadership and organizational culture. Module 3, we will have a key bribery case study, and we will analyze this case study and see what we can learn from them. And module 4, finally, we will wrap up with a key takeaway. So now let's talk about the legal backbone of corporate liability in Malaysia, which is Section 17A of MACC Act 2018. This is a game changer for company because it introduces corporate liability, meaning a company can be held responsible for bribery committed by individual associated with it. And Section 17A MACC Act, it actually stated a commercial organization commits an offense if any person associated with the commercial organization commits a corrupt act in order to obtain or retain business or advantage for the commercial organization. This means that the company itself can be prosecuted, not just the individual involved. And if found guilty, the penalty are severe, up to 10 times the gratification of the sum, a fine of 1 million ringgit, or imprisonment up to 20 years. However, there is one key defense. Okay, the company must prove it had adequate procedure in place to prevent corruption. And this is where ISO 37001 plays a very important role. Who does this apply to? It applies to commercial organization. So this includes company and partnership, which is registered under the Act, like Company Act, Partnership Act, Limited Liability Partnership Act. Okay, and we also apply to associated person. This could be your director, your employees, your partner, your supplier, or even agent who act on behalf of the company. So even they are not officially part of your company, their action can trigger liability. So the key takeaway here is, it's not just about what you do, it's about who or anyone who representing your company does. So that is why having a structured anti-bribery framework or a system like ISO 37001 is critical in demonstrating your company commitment to compliance. So I did mention about the key defense here, where company must prove they had adequate procedure. So what is adequate procedure? Okay, so MACC emphasized the necessity for company to implement adequate procedure, okay, has a defense mechanism. And the recommendation approach is known as the trust framework, as shown in this slide here. And this guideline is published by the Prime Minister Department. Okay, so the reason of having this adequate procedure is we want company to have preventive measure in place and not just reactive one. And ISO 37001 aligns with this principle and provide internationally recognized framework to implement adequate procedure. So bear in mind, if your company fail to prove adequate procedure, they can be held liable under Section 17A. So T represent top-level commitment. It emphasizes leadership role in fostering a culture of integrity. Meaning to say, your senior leadership, your top management, your CEO, your COO, your VP must visibly and actively support anti-bribery measures. R stands for risk assessment, which we want to ensure company identify and mitigate bribery risk within the operation, within the company, within the department. U refers to undertaking control measure, where we should establish practical control method to mitigate bribery risk that you identify. And S highlights systematic review, monitoring, and enforcement, which we need to consistently evaluate and enhance your anti-bribery strategy or your anti-bribery control. It could be through inspection, audit, or checking. And T signifies training and communication, which reinforce awareness and understanding of your company's anti-bribery policy or any procedure among the employees and stakeholders. So we need to regularly train your staff or your stakeholders or clearly communicate them. So we have talked about the corporate liability under MACC Act, and let's see what's in the headline. Okay, so in this slide here, I just screenshot a few. Okay, they are really happening in Malaysia today. So here is some recent bribery case where you can see I put in enforcement agency director being arrested, also civil servant arrested for 5 million in bribe, and also they also do have a news about after Section 17A rollout, when was the first arrest under this Section 17A. And also, we do see that officers soliciting 80,000 bribe. Yeah. So, bribery is a real risk in Malaysia. It actually affecting both public and private sector. And if your company is involved, even unknowingly, you could be held liable. So ISO 37001 help companies to implement preventive measures to avoid legal and reputational damage. So now that we understand adequate procedure, let's look at the key factor that may also influence your ABC compliance. So ABC stands for anti-bribery and corruption. Okay, so ABC compliance is not one size fits all approach. It really depends on several critical factors that the company need to consider. First of all, things that we need to consider is about industry specific regulation. So different industry have different level of bribery and corruption risk due to the nature of the operation, regulatory requirement, government interaction. Okay, so the company must tailor your anti-bribery corruption measure to align with specific regulation that govern your industry. So for example, construction, healthcare, oil and gas, these industries are often high risk due to the heavy government dealings. So therefore, you need to understand your industry-specific regulation, which can help to tailor your anti-bribery framework effectively. So for example, healthcare and pharmaceutical sector or industry. Okay, strictly regulated due to the interaction with government, health agency, hospital, drug regulator. So they are governed by the Act, Poison Act, okay, and Private Healthcare Facility and Service Act, and of course MACC Act. So what is their common bribery risk? It could be medical rep bribing doctor to promote certain drugs, or maybe hospital procurement where the supplier provide kickback to secure supply contract, or maybe for doctors they could be receiving gift, that travel, entertainment in exchange for some favorable treatment. So in such case, this industry they must implement a transparent procurement process for medical supply, or maybe enforce strict policy on doctor-supplier interaction and sponsorship. Another industry which always perceive having a high risk, which is construction and infrastructure. Okay, so because of their high government involvement in public procurement, tender, or permits to make this industry a high-risk sector. So of course, this industry, the company in this industry also must comply to MACC Act, CIDB regulation, or maybe some international law if required. So what is the common bribery risk that we always get to see in construction and infrastructure industry? So probably they want to win a certain contract or speed up a permit approval, or maybe under table payment to secure subcontract, or to manipulate invoice, overpricing, or false claim in certain projects. So with this, okay, the construction industry should the people in the company under the construction industry should implement strict procurement policy with transparency, due diligence or subcontractor, or even more regular audit on project payment and contract awarding. Second factor that you need to consider could be geographic consideration. So geography is another significant factor to consider when it comes to ABC laws. Companies with international partnership or operation may find that bribery risk could happen in different geographic location. Certain country or certain region may have higher bribery risk. So this is something that you need to research, okay, to find out. So corruption risks vary from country to country. So operating in a high-risk country or high-risk region where bribery is more common requires extra due diligence. So company must ensure that they are aware with both local and international anti-bribery law. So there is a CPI, okay, Corruption Perception Index, okay, by Transparency International, where they rank country based on their perceived corruption level. So if you go to the website, you are able to extract that the countries and what is their rating. Okay, so if let's say company operating in high risk country, you need to take extra precaution. Okay, so usually countries with low CPI score, meaning that they are high risk, and they usually having a very weak law enforcement, or a lack of transparency, or having certain bribery risk in the government sector. Yeah, so these countries usually are country like Africa, South America, Eastern Europe, and country with strong anti-corruption laws, strict enforcement, they are low-risk country. Okay, they are countries such as Singapore, Denmark, Finland, and New Zealand. Next factor that we need to consider is supply chain assessment. So a company ABC risk do not stop internally. Okay, they will extend to its entire supply chain, including your supplier, vendor, distributor, contractor, or any of your provider. So if you're having a very weak supply chain, it can create financial, legal, and reputational risk. So if a third party engage in a bribery on the company behalf, you will be liable. Okay, so in MACC, I already mentioned, company can be held liable for bribery committed by your own supplier under the Act. So what can you do? Okay, you can first of all begin with identify supply chain risks. So you can map out and analyze each of your supply chain stage, like procurement, logistic, distribution. From there, you identify what are the high risk area which is related to bribery and corruption. With that, you implement effective control. So what you can do, you probably can develop a supplier code of ethics, or you can put in a certain anti-bribery clause in their contracts. And after that, you are required to monitor and audit them. So you can regularly go and audit your supplier compliance with anti-bribery measure. You can also implement clear consequences if there is any breaches of their anti-bribery agreement. And we would like to promote transparency to encourage open reporting channel or whistleblower mechanism. If you want, you can make it specifically for supply chain. Okay, so you should regularly communicate anti-bribery expectation to all your suppliers. And last but not least, continuous improvement, where we periodically reassess all your supply chain risks and update your policy based on the emerging bribery risk trend and or any changes in the supply chain operation. And one more factor I'm going to talk about is the risk assessment. So risk assessment is a critical step in anti-bribery compliance because not all part of the business face the same level of bribery risk. And by conducting a very thorough risk assessment, your company able to identify, prioritize which are the risks that you need to have mitigation and strengthen your decision making. Bribery risks are not always obvious. Okay, it could also happen in HR hiring process. Yeah, so we need to come out with the bribery risk assessment so that you are able to focus on high risk area, and then from there you will know how to put in your mitigation, what are the monitoring, and what are the improvement needed from the bribery risk assessment that you identified. So moving on, we are going to talk about a top-down approach by examining ethical leadership and organizational culture as a tool against bribery and corruption in the workplace. So this slide is going to cover two key areas, which is ethical leadership and organizational culture. Leadership and a company culture greatly shape how workers behave and complete their daily tasks. If a company is to maintain compliance with the ABC law, then the leader must demonstrate integrity and ethical standard. This sets the foundation for a strong company culture. That culture will influence individuals to act with the same integrity and to empower them to report anything that seems suspicious. So we are required to promote an ABC culture with the company, within the company, and it really requires a strong and ethical leadership. So what does ethical leadership mean? So that is a bit about how leaders set the foundation for anti-bribery compliance. So what can leader do? They must act as a role model by demonstrating ethical decision making. They must enforce anti-bribery policy consistently at all levels. They must encourage transparency by promoting open discussion and support whistleblower protection to ensure employee feel safe reporting misconduct. So example, if your CEO in your company who openly refuse a bribe and report them immediately, this actually send a very strong message, okay, that bribery is unacceptable. And what is organizational culture? Organizational culture is about how workplace culture influences ethical behavior. Okay, so how to build them? Okay, we can build them by conduct regular ethic training to reinforce anti-bribery values. We can implement zero tolerance policy on bribery and unethical behavior. We also can create a clear reporting mechanism. So creating a culture doesn't happen overnight. It requires a structured step to ensure compliance, accountability, and continuous improvement. So here are 4 steps that the company could follow, okay, to prevent corruption and build a culture of integrity. First of all, you can have due diligence. The first step in preventing bribery is conducting due diligence. Many bribery risks come from third-party relationships, such as business partner, vendor, supplier. Is it only applicable to suppliers? No. It applies broadly to all third-party engagement, including your recruitment process and also your customer. So when you are establishing relationship with your customer, particularly those that involve large transaction or large contract, it is important to verify the business legitimacy, ownership structure, past compliance history to avoid corruption risk. Similarly with your recruitment process, okay? When you are hiring a key position, due diligence involves evaluating candidate integrity, ethical track record, potential conflict of interest. So how comprehensive that the due diligence need to be, it depends on the company. But the main thing is we must ensure that your company business interaction align with anti-bribery standards, safeguarding your company integrity and reputation. Again, I'm going to repeat this again. If any one of them engage in bribery on your behalf, your company could be held liable under Section 17A of MACC Act. So how do we ensure that we only work with ethical partners? So we need to do a certain degree of research and assessment. We can do background check via CTOS quiz, okay, on suppliers or vendor before signing a contract. We can check the legal record for past corruption case. We can assess financial transaction for any suspicious activity. Okay, so with that, we also can require our supplier to sign an anti-bribery agreement, okay, or maybe you can up to the extent that you ask them to comply with ISO 37001 if really requires. Okay, we also can rate your suppliers or your business partner on a risk rating. Okay, so probably you can set low risk is someone that is having a clean record. Medium risk could be a vendor that operating from a high risk industry, and high risk vendor can be the vendor from a country with a high corruption risk. Yeah, so if let's say that you're able to do a risk rating on your new supplier, you are able to flag out the high risk supplier, you will be able to also having more additional compliance check before approving or using their services. Second thing what we can do, okay, so due diligence help to prevent bribery risk. But what happened when violation really happen? We enforce consequences. Why is this so important? Because an anti-bribery policy is useless without enforcement. Employee and third party must understand the penalty of violation. So what we can do, okay, as a company, we must clearly define the disciplinary action for bribery. We must establish zero tolerance policy. We must apply the consequences fairly across all levels. No special treatment for any senior management. Okay, and compliance isn't just about punishment. It is also about reinforced ethical behavior. So the company should also or consider rewarding employee who follow anti-bribery policy. We must always know that ethical decision making should be encouraged, just not expected. So the company could have internal recognition, incentive, bonus to recognize, okay, or reward the people who follow ethically. So even with a strict anti-bribery policy, corruption, briberies can still happen if there is no active monitoring. So why audits and monitoring is so important? Because bribery and fraud often happen in hidden transaction. If you do not have a proper audit, bribery can go unnoticed in financial record. monitoring prevents and detect financial irregularity early. So you could engage your firm, okay, a firm to come to do a regular financial audit to identify any questionable payment. We also can review all the procurement and vendor transaction for any inconsistency, okay, and if let's say there is, okay, we must have investigation. Okay, and also what we want to emphasize is to encourage employees to report suspicious activity. Audit alone is not enough. Employee also must feel safe, okay, in reporting corruption or any misconduct. Okay, a strong whistleblower program encourage employees to report unethical behavior without fear. Okay, so sometimes report from employees can uncover bribery that audit might not detect. Okay, so how can we strengthen our whistleblower protection? Maybe you may want to allow anonymous reporting. You must protect the whistleblower from retaliation or job loss, or reward employees who help to expose bribery risk. And finally is about continuous improvement. Okay, preventing bribery isn't a one-time thing. Okay, the company must continuously improve, okay, anti-bribery policy to stay compliant because bribery risks evolve over time. So when you are doing a risk assessment, in this year you're probably having a lot of risk is under a low risk, but you won't know. Probably 1 year later, things change, industry change, regulation change. Probably the risk level could increase to a medium to a high risk. Therefore, we must always, okay, have a review, okay, we must put in the continuous improvement effort into it to ensure that we stay updated and we stay compliant to any new regulation. So move on, I will be sharing 2 case study, okay, and how are we going to put in the trust principle. So this case study, number 1, okay, is about dealing with third party, okay, preventing under the table money. So as a construction company C's operation relies heavily on third party, such as contractors, suppliers, and joint venture. Company C recognizes that it can be exposed if any third party behave in an illegal, unsafe, or unethical way. For example, the third party offer or pay bribe to official to get work certified and paid. So in undertaking control measure, what can company C do to prevent this? So based on the trust principle here, what can they do under top level commitment? So probably senior management can enforce clear anti-corruption policy for internal and external stakeholder. And of course, the leader must set the tone for ethical business conduct. For risk assessment, what can they do? They should start identifying high-risk third party by reviewing all the business relationship, look for red flag, such as high commission fee or any weak contract term. And what kind of control measure that they can put in? Okay, we can conduct due diligence on all third party before engagement. We can vet supplier by checking financial report, audit finding, and reputation. And we can also include anti-bribery clause in all contracts. Okay, so how can we monitor? We should ensure all third party comply with anti-bribery policy or anti-corruption policy. We can conduct a regular audit and risk review to identify suspicious activity. And for the training and communication, what should we do? We should educate the supplier and contractor on anti-bribery policy and making sure that they really understand the consequences of bribery. So many bribery cases involve third parties such as contractor, supplier, joint venture. So this case study focuses on company C here. You just imagine this is a construction company that relies heavily on third party. So if let's say this supplier is going to offer bribe to any official to get approval, the company could be held liable under Section 17A. So therefore, we need to implement, okay, the anti-bribery control or your anti-bribery framework in such situation. Case study number 2 that I'm going to explain is about due diligence in recruitment. So recruitment is not just about hiring talent, it is also about ensuring new hires do not have bribery or corruption risk. So in this case study here, company F stated that a service and retail company is expanding its business into IT industry and seeking a new director to head the IT department. The company is concerned about the danger of employing people who pose corruption risk and is looking for way on how to minimize the risk. So they are actually concerned about hiring someone with a corruption risk. So how can they minimize the risk in recruitment? So under the T, top level commitment, they should establish clear hiring policy to ensure ethical recruitment. They can set specific criteria for hiring directors or certain key position. And for risk assessment, they must able to identify fraud risk in recruitment. So what kind of fraud risk could happen? Fake qualification, criminal history. Okay, so we need to flag out the serious concern such as conflict of interest or any false document. And what are the control measures? We need to define strict qualification and background check recruitment, especially like for high risk role. We should conduct a document verification, reference check, interview, and we may also want to form a nomination or selection committee to ensure fair hiring decision and also include the conflict of interest policy in the employment contract. So with that, how are we going to monitor and make sure that this is effective? Okay, so we can track compliance with the anti-corruption hiring policy, and we can take disciplinary action against non-compliance if really detected. And the training shall be conducted to educate to employees on corruption risk in recruitment. And we can share to all employees in the company if we do have an anti-bribery policy, okay, with the handbook or in the website. Okay, so why is recruitment a bribery risk? Some of the client will be asking, but is recruitment a bribery risk? Yes, okay, because unethical hiring can lead to bribery within the company. When an employee with a history of corruption may engage in fraud or bribery in their new role. Okay, and also if let's say poor recruitment control, then there will be an increase of the risk of hiring unqualified, okay, or compromised individual. Therefore, hiring, okay, or recruitment process is also one area that we need to identify that is there bribery risk that may occur. So now we have explored 2 case study. Okay, the next question is what happens if bribery is really suspected? Okay, in the company. You must know how to properly investigate the bribery cases as well. So at the preparation stage, okay, what should you do? So the first step in bribery investigation is to clearly define your scope. Okay, without a well-defined scope, the investigation can become unfocused, time-consuming, and ineffective. So there are 3 elements that I consider, okay, when defining the scope. First, you need to identify the allegation. Why is this so important? We must establish a clear understanding on the specific allegation, and this includes who is involved, what actions are being questioned, what evidence is available. We need to set the investigation time frame to ensure that, okay, the investigation don't go out of way. Okay, and we also need to understand, is there any jurisdiction involved? Why is this important? Bribery investigation must follow legal and regulatory requirement, and you must at least have the basic knowledge about Malaysia MACC Act. Second, we must also establish an investigation team. So once the scope of the bribery investigation is defined, the next step is to form the right team to conduct the investigation professionally and objectively. So what you need to do, you must make sure you have the right expertise, okay, and the investigation must be unbiased and credible, and all findings are legally sound and ethically handled. So once you have prepared, okay, we can start with the investigation and analysis stage. So one thing, the key thing that we need to do is preserve evidence, which is critical. Without proper evidence, allegation of bribery may be difficult to prove or dismiss. Evidence is the key of the investigation. Thus, the investigation team should identify and secure all relevant evidence such as document, email, financial record, or any witness statement. Okay, they should also ensure that the evidence is collected and stored in a way that maintain the integrity. And bribery investigation can impact reputation, career, company morale. If handled incorrectly, investigation may lead to public speculation, mistrust, result in retaliation against whistleblower, and damage company's credibility. Yeah, so maintaining confidentiality is ensuring investigation protect the privacy of all involved party and all the employee who are required to be part of the investigation feel safe, okay, whenever providing any information, and the company can manage legal risk professionally. And after that, we are required to also interview the witness. This process is very important because we are here to gather the first-hand account of event of related to bribery, cross-checking information to validate and disprove allegation, and we also want people to have a culture of honesty and transparency in the company. So when we are preparing question, we must structure the questioning method. We cannot just have a standard checklist and interview is done from the standard checklist. Okay, every witness will have different perspective of the incident, so a one-size-fits-all questionnaire does not work. Next will be review document and forensic analysis. So the investigation team should gather all the documents, all the relevant documents such as financial record, contract, or any communication record, and you can search for the pattern and irregularity that may support, okay, the allegation. So finding any patterns, warning sign, missing information may have a better investigation outcome. And if really required, you may also want to have a forensic analysis if necessary. If an investigator should engage a forensic expert to analyze electronic data of financial transaction. Okay, this is necessary because sometimes you are unable, some irregularity or evidence of bribery, they are hidden and very difficult to find. So therefore, you may need to engage an expert to have a deeper investigation. So once bribery investigation is completed, the company must take appropriate action based on findings. This will be the post-investigation action. So first of all, you may want to cooperate with the law enforcement. So it depending, okay, if the allegation involve criminal activity, your company may need to involve and cooperate with law enforcement agency. Okay, so depending on the outcome. And number two, employee suspension and termination. So if the investigation is legit, then the corruption claim with the corruption claim and evidence, then disciplinary action for the guilty party will need to be administered. This may include suspension or termination. The severity of the corruption, company policy and legal requirement will determine the consequences. Third, we need to have a report finding. So after the investigation team should prepare a comprehensive report summarizing the finding of the investigation, and this report should be recommended, okay, or hand over to the top management for corrective action or improvement to prevent future occurrence. And this report will be very useful for company policymaker, leadership, and also law enforcement for legal compliance. And bribery investigations most of the time involve legal laws, right? So is the case with other business processes, the investigation process must comply with certain relevant legal requirements such as Employment Act, okay, or any applicable legal requirement. So the people that are selected in the investigation team, you also must make sure they are familiar with those legal requirements. Next, we have implement preventive measure. So once the investigation is complete and the consequences has been decided, your company should implement measure to prevent similar incident in the future. So this may include enhancing your internal control, provide additional training to employees, or revise your policy procedure and making it a stronger monitoring protocol. And improve communication here is very important to communicate the outcome of the investigation to relevant stakeholders such as employees, shareholders, regulatory authority. This is also usually required by law and company policy, and it is also beneficial for your company to communicate change and improvement of the policy to protect workers and prevent future incident. Lastly, okay, seek for expert guidance. So you may consult your legal professional during investigation process if it is required. So the team should also follow the company policy and procedure throughout the investigation process. If you are not experienced in conducting a workplace investigation, I would say that considering seeking guidance for a legal expert, and also you may also assemble a team, okay, which include a legal department employees or staff, okay, which also can help with the investigation outcome. So we have covered a few steps to how effectively manage your bribery investigation, from preparation to investigation and to the post-investigation. So this action ensure that the company is not only compliant, but also continually strengthen the defense, okay, against bribery risk. So before we come to the end of the webinar, okay, let's reflect on how important anti-bribery compliance and how ISO 37001 help company to prevent corruption. Bribery is a major risk, but a strong anti-bribery management system can help to mitigate it effectively. ISO 37001 is the global standard for establishing, implementing, maintaining, and improving anti-bribery management system. So the key component of ISO 37001 include, okay, context of organization, leadership, planning, support, operation, performance evaluation, and improvement. When you have a structured ABMS or structured anti-bribery management system, it really will help your company to stay legally compliant and improve governance and enhance corporate integrity. So why should company fully implement ISO 37001? Because they promote worldwide recognition. They strengthen corporate reputation worldwide. Number two, prevent, detect, and manage bribery cases. So this will be able to reduce any bribery risk in your company. Number three, increase trust and confidence. Okay, from this you can improve stakeholders' relationship. Number four, provide documentation to protect you from liability. So with that, okay, you provide documentation to protect you from any offenses, okay? Number five, ensure ethical business practices where you build a sustainable compliance culture. So ISO 37001 is not just a certification. I would say it's a powerful tool to reduce corruption risk and strengthen business integrity. So now we have explored the anti-bribery framework and the principle and the implementation is essential for you to assess and enhance your own company anti-bribery strategy. So how can you start with? You can start with assess your company organizational risk. So what can you do? You can conduct a bribery and corruption risk assessment. And from there, you can identify which are the high risk area in your business operation. You can also strengthen your ABC compliance program by implementing a trust framework that I showed earlier and ensure top-level commitment and active enforcement. You can also build a culture of integrity by providing regular training on anti-bribery policy, encourage employees to report suspicious activity via a whistleblower mechanism. And last but not least, you can leverage ISO 37001 for compliance and ESG success. With that, they align with the international best practices for ABC compliance and improve the control or any processes within your company. So for now, okay, you could ask yourself, where do you stand now? In your company, do you have an anti-bribery control? And is the company anti-bribery control effective? And if let's say you do have, is it a structured approach? And after today, what step will you take after today's session? I hope that today's webinar is useful for you, and let's work together to create a corruption-free business environment. So we have covered significant ground today, and now let's open to the floor for any question. Feel free to ask about any aspect of the standard or our earlier discussion or any practical step for your company. Do we have any question from the floor? Anyone would like to clarify anything about the ISO 37001 requirement or any of your practices? You may drop the question in your chat. So if there is no question, I think we will move on. But of course, if you would like to further discuss on how to implement ISO 37001 in the company, feel free to reach out. So we would like to extend a special opportunity to help you further. So you may claim your free 30 minutes consultation session with our team. And during this session, we will help to identify gap, provide clear and actionable next step, and offer a personalized guidance tailored to your organization anti-bribery and corruption journey. So you may scan the QR code here, okay, and book your consultation. It is complimentary, so I think you shouldn't miss out this offer. Okay, so move on. Before we wrap up, I would like to quickly highlight our upcoming webinar on GMP compliant facility design, specifically tailored for business in food, cosmetic, and traditional medicine sector. So this section will provide valuable insight into achieving compliance through effective facility design. So do register soon with the QR code shown in this slide. So I would like to say thank you very much for joining us today. We hope you gain valuable insight that you can implement in your company. Don't hesitate to reach out us via email or connect with me on LinkedIn for further question or guidance. So if you feel like, okay, you would like to discuss further on how to implement ISO 37001 in your company, feel free to reach out. Okay, so thank you so much for the participation today. So I hope that we work together to build a bribery-free business environment. Thank you.